Hi, everyone. Welcome to Printboy Magazine's virtual Queer Women's Roundtable. Today, we are talking with our beautiful editors, Aziza, Sarah Ray, Melissa, and Katie, about the experience of queer women as we know it. So, I'm going to pass it off to Sarah Ray. I'm here to listen and learn today.
Yeah, so I really wanted to have this conversation with all of you women because I started realizing in my personal life that I was noticing a lot of people that I had gone to school with, whether in high school or college, were starting to come out as bisexual. In particular, women and women who were married to men or in long term relationships with men. I started noticing that at first, and, which is great and exciting. But then I started realizing that strangers on the internet were also coming out, and there was just this big influx of women coming out as bisexual. And I was just wondering if this is something that you are all seeing in your lives. Is this a trend that's happening on your guys' side of the internet, or is it just mine?
So I've definitely seen that pattern. I was actually really excited to see it. I thought it was a fluke, but then I was like, wait, like there's another one and another one and another one, and then everybody brought it up. So I have noticed the pattern. I think it's very exciting. I came out this year to my parents, which they're like the last ones to know, but it was really exciting seeing other people claim the fluidity that we all know has been present for a very long time. So it's definitely a trend I've noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. I have definitely noticed this trend. I've hoped for this trend my entire queer experience. No, I think there is something really liberating about what has happened during quarantine and into this new chapter of the pandemic. Um, and I live in Portland now, so I'm seeing an even different kind of group of people, and it's extremely queer, and it's still happening here. Like, I have a friend that I've known since I was 12 years old who is now coming out, and it's like so exciting because we spent our entire adulthood apart, but I still always knew that she was queer, but like that wasn't my place, and now she's finally coming to that conclusion. And so it's really interesting to see like people from different walks of life that you come back together with, and they're still kind of on that journey. So I'm excited to be a part of it and to help instill wisdom on these baby gays, because they're like, oh my gosh, how do I ask this girl out or all this stuff? And I'm like, finally, I have something I can like instill wisdom and really feel like I know what I'm talking about now, because it's been almost a decade since, or over a decade since I've been out. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh my goodness. Bisexuality, man, it is everywhere these days, and there's no denying it. And, I actually identify as bisexual, and my mother is bisexual, and bisexuality has always been something that has been in my life. But I think with the increase of people finally coming to terms with it, I think a huge part of it comes from the way we're operating as a society. Like, it is no longer deemed inappropriate to come out as bisexual. There is such a welcoming space in our country that was never there, that's starting to make itself known, and people are becoming more and more confident accepting this fluidity of sexuality. Like, you know what, yeah, I am bisexual because I think it's allowed. And I know as a bisexual, I struggle with a lot of internalized homophobia. That I'm supposed to marry a man, I'm supposed to have a child, I'm supposed to live my life the way women have lived their lives for many years. And I think now we're experiencing a change in our conversation where that's not necessary. And I think that that is really allowing these people to feel valid in coming out, and valid that they do not want to follow life as it has always been. So I think it's super exciting, but I definitely see it, and I think it's great. I mean, as of someone who came out as bisexual, I received a lot of it's just a phase, you know, you're gonna get over it. How do you know you like women if you haven't slept with women? And here I am, still bisexual. But so I'm excited to see the change. I think it's necessary, and I hope that I think we see it primarily in women, and I hope that we continue to see fluidity, excuse me, of sexuality within, you know, men as well, because we don't see as a lot of men coming out as bisexual. Definitely not in comparison to the number of women that are coming out.
I also, to kind of Katie's point, I think bisexuality for a long time, especially for women, was viewed as like a phase, or, you know, she's being a slut, she's bored, she wants attention. I know that my first experience with a bisexual woman was when I was, I think in high school or junior high, even. An older girl I knew started dating a woman after she had been with a man. And I just remember all the conversations that were had around me about bisexual women and how, you know, is she a lesbian now? Does she like men? And then ultimately, when her and her girlfriend broke up, you know, people were like, oh, well, it was just a phase. And, you know, and the idea of bisexuality completely went out the window. It was like when she was with this woman, it meant that she must be bisexual because she couldn't possibly be a lesbian. But the second that she was not in that relationship anymore, it was like, well, it was just a phase, just like we said. And so that was my first experience with bisexuality. And, you know, it's interesting how that's starting to change, obviously for the better. But do you guys have any thoughts on that kind of,
So
you
many
know?
thoughts. So when I first came out, I was kind of pulled out of the closet. I was in boarding school. I was very infatuated with this girl who took that as her opportunity to help me out of the closet. But what a lot of people don't know about this experience for me, where it was very traumatic. I actually came out, like when I first said the words out loud, that I was bi. And she kind of made me feel like I was just too scared to come out completely. So she, you know, I'm not saying like, oh, well, because she told me I wasn't, all of a sudden I believed it. But I felt like, okay, I don't want to mess things up with this girl. So like, I'm just going to be like, okay, fine, maybe you're right. Like, maybe I am just queer. And I think it honestly, like, messed me up a bit because it made me think I couldn't be bisexual because maybe I wasn't pretty enough, or maybe I was better at being gay, so that I should just do that. And it's funny because I now have had sexual encounters and experiences with men, and I don't know if bisexual is like the term for me, but I don't really like the whole labeling. Like, why can't I be queer and have sex with men? Like, you know what I mean? I never really liked the term lesbian to begin with. Like, I think it's too limiting. And you know, I don't like any labels truly. So that was really interesting for me because I just always thought, oh, you have to be a specific type of gay to be bisexual. Like, if you're too butch, you're not allowed. So that was kind of my experience with that. And I'm very happy to say that, like, I don't let labels stop me from who I want to be with. Yeah.
To Melissa's point, I actually initially came out as bisexual, but earlier this year I not switched, but clarified, I guess, my sexuality is pansexual because I felt like bi was too limiting. And I've heard people discuss both. It's like, oh no, bisexual doesn't mean just two genders. It's all up to how you decide, but bi literally means two. So I prefer using the term pansexual, but my experiences as a bisexual woman around friends was very accepting. I had no issues. But in the dating world, it was a hot mess. It was a mess. Dating women, I ran into a lot of lesbian women who just did not date bisexual women because they thought that we were liars, or thought that we just wanted to like have threesomes, or it was a phase. Or and then on the opposite side, dating men, it was, oh, you're a freak, oh, you want to have and it's like, I'm just out here trying to find love like the rest of you. I don't know why we're jumping to conclusions. So it was a little rough dating wise, but thankfully, like, I had a lot of acceptance from friends and family, but there's definitely a lot of misconceptions around the label of bisexuality.
Yeah, definitely. And when I came out, I didn't even come out as bisexual. I came out as queer because, again, the word bisexual it's got it definitely has a repertoire. And, I mentioned my mom is bisexual. My mother left my father, ended their marriage, and went into a relationship with a woman. So I think I've always had this idea, and she never had a coming out. So I've always had this idea that you can be with who you want to be with, and it's open and it's fine. And you're on your own spiritual journey with your sexuality and finding out what you like. Um, I get a lot of I get a lot of backlash from my family. I grew up very Catholic, and there's lots of Catholic guilt that goes into it, especially identifying as queer. And I no longer identify as Catholic, but at the same time, it was always deemed like, okay, you're bisexual, you just are lazy. You don't want to have a relationship with a man because it's too hard. You're too different. So it's easier to have a relationship with a woman, and it's easier to go into that type of relationship because they understand your body and your genetic makeup and blah 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 blah. But I never felt that was true. Like I didn't think that I was turning bisexual because it was easier. And so I think that what we're seeing as a whole is a mentality shift from older generations that previously deemed bisexuality as inappropriate, that really doesn't matter. And I do think that it is such a westernized idea, defining sexuality, because we see in a lot of like Eastern European areas, in a lot of like just in general Eastern culture, there is no sexual identifying. There's more just like, you sleep with who you want to sleep with, you have a good time, and go on with it. But I definitely am seeing that overall the bisexuality community has a reputation, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I feel very privileged in that I have never felt like I had to come out in any way. But I think part of why I've never come out is because I similarly like have never really identified with being bisexual. I've always kind of said like, oh, I'm a 2 on the Kinsey scale. I'm primarily heterosexual with homosexual tendencies. And I'm dating a woman right now, and I feel like there's a lot more pressure even from like my friends who are queer and identify in these different ways, that are like, oh, so then you're bi. And I'm like, well, I don't think that I'm bi. That doesn't feel like the right term for me. And like part of me is like, oh, maybe I'm queer, but like, none of these terms seem right. And to me, it's one of those things where, if I chose to be with a woman for the rest of my life, I think everyone who knows me would just be like, huh, makes sense. So I'm like, why do I have to, label that I'm bisexual, or if I'm a lesbian or queer or whatever. So I do feel privileged in that way, because I know that not everybody's life is like that. And I think similarly with this sort of like, large coming out that I've been noticing, is quite a few of the women in my life who have come out as bi recently actually come from very religious backgrounds. And I'm seeing them, kind of having this like internal struggle with like their spirituality and their relationship with their family, who's very much in that world, and things like that. And so I know that it's a very difficult journey for a lot of people, but it's clear that it's really important for a lot of these people to be true to themselves, which is really beautiful and really scary. But I think it's
Mhm.
it's great. And I think that all of us who identify as whatever we identify. I think it's kind of our responsibility to kind of, as Melissa was saying, is like help these baby queers come out and feel comfortable and be kind of a support system for them.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump in actually because I'm gonna have to go soon back to work. So I just want to say that as I close off here and turn the conversation over to you all, it's interesting that we all mentioned the stigma of coming out in the LGBTQ plus community as bisexual or somebody who sleeps with both genders, or somebody who sleeps with any individual, that there is a stigma. Melissa, you mentioned it, where it was like when you came out, it was kind of like you're too afraid to come out as a lesbian. And I think it's all connected, and we all feel that not only is there pressure from the outside world having to deal with internalized homophobia, or like you mentioned, Sarah, your own spirituality and coming to terms with it, but there's also pressure from the LGBTQ plus community in itself that's like, oh, you're bisexual. And we've seen it throughout media. I mean, it was hugely talked about on the L Word with Alice, and her being bisexual and sleeping with men and women, and always being like, ooh, you're with a man
Tina.
now. And Tina, yes, it's like, oh, you're with a man now, like, ooh. So I'm not saying, I know I am so privileged to be able to come out in a time where so much is so many resources are at arm's length. But I also will say that I feel pressure not only from society in general, but also the LGBTQ plus community to be very specific in my label, so that I am not stepping on anyone's toes, or etc. And I just want to thank you, Sarah Ray, for bringing this into conversation, because I think it is something that needs to be talked about, but it's very difficult to talk about. Again, nobody wants to, make anyone feel less than, but I think that we're definitely going to see more and more people identify as bisexual. I do think that it is a safe space for a stepping stone in, identifying as queer, dealing with that internalized homophobia. For me, coming out as bisexual was a lot easier than coming out as gay, lesbian, queer, whatever it was, because that's a term that's been used for many years, that people understand, that I don't have to teach anyone about. And I think that is definitely a mindset that I had to work on myself, because I think that that's a very privileged mindset. But I also think that it comes from the pressure of all sides. But yeah, thank you guys so much for having me, and I will turn it back over to you all to answer the rest of that question.
So I think it might be a little cliche, but I think if you are proud of yourself, just existing in the way that you are when you go out in the world every day, I don't think you should be worrying about anything else. You're not harming anyone. You're not being malicious. You're not being unkind. Just forget everyone else. Do what's best for you. And as long as you can do it with confidence and hold your head up high, I think your life will be so much easier when you don't have to worry about what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah, I feel like the older I get, the more I realize, like, number one, no one knows what they're doing. Like, I think it was John Lennon who once said, the more I see, the less I know for sure. And at the end of the day, like, we all humans are trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, and I think that ultimately, it's more important to be true to yourself and follow your gut and your instinct on these things, than ending your life with this thought like, what if I had done XYZ. And so I think, it's 2021. Homophobia is out. I know it's still happening, but it's so out of fashion, and there are so many queer communities all over the place, that are, you know, standing and waiting with arms open. And so I think that if you feel like, that's a community that's really calling to you, I think it's one that you should definitely step into and embrace. And ultimately, like, it's your prerogative. It's your life. You don't have to come out. It doesn't have to be a big announcement. It's not a gender reveal. Like, it doesn't have to be this big thing. You can make it your private life.
Yeah.
Like, just because we announce everything on social media these days does not mean we have to. And so I think just move in a way that makes you comfortable and follow your heart.
Yeah. If I had any advice, it would just be to be brave and to live your life for yourself, and to not let the pressures of where we are in the world, whether it be from your friends or your family or politics or the economy or anything, kind of force you into a box or a place that you don't feel you belong. And although it may be scary to stand up for yourself, or if you feel it is the right time to come out and it is a not perfectly safe environment, just remember that you having the bravery to do that is already steps ahead of people that don't have those tools, and you don't know how much you are saving somebody by doing that for yourself. Like, there are still so many people who feel like they can't speak out on their own behalf, but if they see somebody else doing it, that is inspiring, and there could be that one extra person that happens to come out that makes it feel like it is possible. So even though you're living for yourself, we are still, everything we do is connected to everybody else. So as long as you try to live your life with an open heart and just trying to figure out how to be the best version of yourself and the healthiest version, so that you don't have to lash out on anybody or keep things inside, like, that is how we are going to reach a more peaceful union with everybody. It's just love. It's just love.
Thank you all so much for coming and talking with me about this. It's been such an interesting thing to watch happen for a lot of people, and I loved being able to talk with people who've gone through similar experiences, talk about this. And I hope that these women in our lives that are coming out as bisexual, and any individual that maybe not in our lives yet, coming out as bisexual, that they know that, like, we love them and we support them and we see them.
Mhm.
And it matters and they matter. And so I'm just so moved that you all were here to chat with me about this, so thank you.
Me too. I could talk about it for hours. When's the next
Great.
one?
Honestly, I was just thinking, I was like, I think this is the beginning of many conversations. I honestly think having a women's roundtable, if not every issue, would be really impactful and really cool to not only see how the conversation grows, but how you all grow as queer women and as editors. And so, thank you for doing this today and for letting me sit here and listen, because I am surrounded by queer men all the time, and I don't get to hear this experience in this format. And so, thank you for today, and I love you so much, and I'll see you soon.
Love you all.
Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.